Welcome to another episode of Tiny Chair Talks. Today's topic is depression. Let's get comfortable. Angie, I know you as Angie. We go way back, all of 2 hours ago. We just
totally,
met.
yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much for joining us. I'm so happy that you came. Speaking of which, I hear that drive was crazy.
Yeah, it's been raining like crazy, so it added an extra hour to my trip.
Wow, a whole extra hour
Just for rain.
Unbelievable, unbelievable. Well, that's awesome. I'm so glad you're here. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so I live in Asheville, North Carolina. I am an instructional designer currently.
Wow.
I'm a former mental health therapist. So that's what I always like to say in my past life. Lived many lives already.
Oh my gosh.
But so yeah, I enjoy hiking and being out in the mountains. And
Very cool.
I used to live in Minnesota where it snowed and it was gray.
And I know you missed the snow, don't you?
Not at all.
So you said you're currently an instructional designer?
Yeah.
What do you design? Instructions? I mean, how does that work?
Quite literally, that is my job.
Oh, I'm so good.
It's really cool.
Mm-hmm.
Like, people in my business come to me and they say, "Hey, there's this problem that we have, and we really need a solution to it." So I'll come in and I'll say, "Well, I think we should create a video to inspire your workers to do something different, or maybe it's something new. So I want to create an e-learning that they can take in their spare time, things like that." So that's my job. That's what I get to do every day.
Such a contrast from where you said that you came, or mental health to instructional design. How does the two of them meet, and how did that transition take place?
It's student loans.
Wow.
That's where it meets.
Talk about that a little bit.
So I had to find a job that I could afford to pay my student loans.
Right.
And there was this job at an insurance company, and they wanted people that had behavioral health degrees.
Really?
Yeah.
There's a market for that?
Yes.
Unreal.
They want you to have that understanding, to be able to talk to people over the phone, because talking over the phone is a lot harder in person. You can't pick up cues and stuff like that.
Right.
And so like they really wanted you to be able to relate to the customers and help them through stressful situations.
Right.
Yeah.
Wow. Why mental health before getting into instructional design? Why did you choose that field specifically?
Yeah, so it relates to our topic today.
Okay, awesome.
So first of all, ever since I was like 5 years old, my mom talks about how like my aunts and stuff like that would talk to me about topics that they shouldn't be, because I was just a really good listener. And so like from the very beginning, I just thought, oh, this is like something you do. Like you could do this for a living. And so it kind of solidified when I went through a serious depression and was hospitalized. And
if you don't mind me asking, how old were you at the time?
I was 17 when that happened.
Gotcha.
Yeah, so about that point, it was kind of like that turning point where I was like, somebody else helped me and I want to help them. Wow. And so then that's kind of how it came about.
How long was that bat of depression that you were going through? How long was your season, so to speak?
So, I started the season probably when I was about 14 and didn't have any help. So I relied on self-medication, and that's kind of where my like addictive behavior started. And so it started when I was 14, and it got to a point where I was going to harm myself when I was 17.
Wow.
And that's when family members and people that I was surrounded by started to notice something was really, really wrong.
So as you know, I too am in the mental health field.
Yeah.
Qualified mental health professional, do intensive in-home, and all that good stuff. Deal with children ages 3 to 20.
Yeah.
See a lot of various different diseases, dysfunctions, disabilities, so to speak, and different ways of coping, different ways of expressing oneself. If you don't mind sharing, what was your outlet? How did you express yourself?
At that point, it was a lot of drugs. So I was a pill popper.
Mm-hmm.
And that was because I went to a boarding school, so it was something I could get access to.
Wow. Was it a Christian boarding school?
Yes.
Wow.
And so it was something I could get access to, and then at the same time, like, people don't detect it in the
So
same kind of
please
way.
don't tell me that you're alluding to the fact that there's access to pills in Christian
What?
schools. Wow. All right.
And I mean, I'm 35, so I mean, we're talking about...
Don't you mean 25?
Oh, yeah, I wish. Actually, wait, I don't.
Take
don't
that
want to go
back.
back to those days.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's there.
It's there. Wow.
I love when we pretend like it's not, because it's
Ooh.
there.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
But yeah, a lot of times I didn't have to leave.
So nowadays, in working with the kids that I work with in the
Yeah.
youth, they individuals who are like-minded and have presentations tend to kind of bubble together, kind of stick
Yeah,
together.
yeah.
Did you just kind of find one another without even saying, "Hey, I have depression. Anyone want to join me?" And how did that kind of just?
No, that was not my experience at all. You know, I was actually like the experimenter of the group and stuff like that. And so like I was more kind of, I would just pretend like everything was okay, and I wouldn't express myself.
So nobody in your circle
So
knew
my
your
circle
struggles.
really knew what was happening. And then they just saw it as more experimentation for me to be like, oh, hey, I know you have that hookup, or you know someone who knows somebody.
Wow.
Like, can you help me out? I just want to try something.
And never got caught. Never, no adult ever intervened in your behalf.
No.
Wow.
No.
Wow.
And honestly, my parents didn't even know about it until I was hospitalized and I was forced to tell them.
And that was
what had
around
been going
17.
on. 17, yeah.
What was your breaking point? What was the point where you said, you know what, enough is enough, or I need help and I'm going to actively seek that?
Yeah. I think, you know, the tipping point was when I was 16 to 17, I went to 3 different high schools.
Did your depression equally escalate?
Yeah. Yeah, so it was a combination of things that just kind of brought it to a point where I felt so helpless and hopeless that there just seemed like there was no other way out for me.
And some of my kids have described that feeling like
Yeah.
standing on the mountaintop and screaming but nobody hearing.
Exactly.
Similar?
Exactly.
Wow.
Very similar.
Wow, wow, wow.
And it's crazy because people will say, well, I never knew, you know, things like that. And I get that because you're trying really hard to hide it because you feel shame. You know, you feel like everybody else can control this, but I can't.
So going back and looking and reflecting, so to speak, do you feel like at some point you honestly did try to reach out and let your concerns be known, but nobody would pay attention?
Yeah, I had a couple of therapists. My first couple ones were really bad, and just it.
Bad in the sense of not being able to connect, not understanding.
Not being able to connect well. Also, just like I think maybe some of the training was. I mean, just because now with being a trained therapist,
right.
You know, I look back and like, whoa, I would have never done that with someone in my position. Which is really easy to judge from the outside.
For sure.
But you know, there's people who get into the field sometimes for the wrong reason. That's a matter of fact, and I'll just put out a little plug there. I think like that's why it's okay to shop for a therapist.
Wow.
Like it's okay.
Very good commercial break. Absolutely well said.
Because it's just like sometimes like it's not going to be a good fit, like you're describing. But then sometimes like they aren't trained well, or they're not trained the way you need them to be trained.
Right.
So sorry, a little break there.
No, well needed commercial break. And back to our regularly scheduled program. No, but that was awesome. That we do need to understand that it's not taboo to say, hey, this is not working, I need to look elsewhere, or, help me to, or refer me. Can you refer me to someone else? Because, that's fine. It's absolutely fine. What's equally okay is the fact that we as Christians, even Adventists, I dare say that, can say, I have X, I have depression in our situation, and I need help.
Yeah.
Because oftentimes, from what a lot of the kids share with me, is the fact that they're ashamed. You used that word earlier.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And it's like, oh, I could never say that I have depression because that's not of the Lord.
There's a story in the Bible about this blind man, and the disciples come up on him, and, they're asking questions like, where did this sin come from?
Right,
like
it
who
was
sinned
his
for you
fault.
to be born blind?
Right.
This is not about who sinned, and like it's sin manifesting itself, but it's more like that doesn't mean God can't do something with it, and it does not mean that person's wrong for being born blind, like, or that's their parents did something wrong,
that's their punishment.
It's not a punishment. And I think about what's really interesting to me is I was reflecting the other day about how in Jesus' time, any kind of disability, if you were deformed in any kind of way, you had health problems, it's kind of seen as a sin, right? Like there's something wrong with you. Like if you correct whatever was wrong with you, then suddenly it'll be okay, right? We've let go of health problems. You can take medication, to help you sustain life or to cure you, but for when it comes to mental health, there's still this kind of stigma that's like you're giving in, you're giving up on God, you're you're taking the path that's not righteous. There's just like I mean, I think the reasons are different for many people, but there's still a lot of stigma around it.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And a lot of the issues and the stigmatism that society has set has crept into the church even, because we can recognize someone who needs help if they come with a wheelchair.
Yes.
But we can't recognize, or we don't recognize, an individual who comes with mental health and they're asking for help or they need help, and we see that something is in need, but we just don't take the time to ask or question or even inquire as to what it is. We automatically say, oh, that's a bad kid, or they got issues, or they're just acting out behaviorally, or whatever the case is. So that's a really interesting point. So we know how the Bible talks about how faith without works is dead. What are some ways, strategies, tools, interventions even that you could suggest or that you used personally that you find effective?
So first thing I'll say is that, you brought up the idea of like a problematic child, right? Maybe it's that they have attention issues. It's not that they're just a problematic child. I think one of the things is recognizing those people around you, and you can do that by watching their expressions. You can, maybe they're that person that you're like, they're so negative. Well, when you're in the middle of depression, like it's hard to not be negative. Like you're just faced every day with that hopelessness, that helplessness, worthlessness, shame, feeling fatigued. Like you can't help but be negative. So I think that's, first of all, it's like look for those kind of indicators.
So essentially find the trigger and not the behavior as a result of the trigger. Yes, that makes clear sense, because even now, like when our children, when they react to something, we want to immediately address what they did and not what caused them to behave that way. So that makes I love that you put it out there, because they're not gonna listen to me. They ain't gonna listen to you. Since you said it, it makes sense.
Well, I hope.
Mr.
I'm
Ray
just a tiny chair expert, so I don't know.
Thanks, host. What can additionally, what other things helped you and maybe could offer some help to some of the others struggling with depression or any other mental health issue?
Yeah, a couple of things. I think first of all, again, getting to know someone personally, like we've talked about, I can't express that enough, how important that is, because like you said, it's going to take time to kind of peel back that onion, and they may not have the support of a therapist or someone else there too, right? So it's going to take a long while to kind of get to that point. So just taking that time, and that may sound really daunting, so that might not be your top priority. But another good one is, and has always been helpful for me, is when people show me how much they value me.
Love it.
So when they and maybe not show, but even just tell and say, like, I love you for who you are, I accept you for who you are, I cry for your struggles, you can say, I'm praying for you. Just do it in a thoughtful way.
What about interventions, coping skills, different tools and strategies that work for you or that you can possibly suggest? Yeah,
so as far as for me, coping skills, exercise is a really big one for me. Like whether it's just even going for a 20-minute walk, like I have to get moving,
and you love
just
to hike,
and I love to hike. So that's like the best place for me. That's my happy place. But I also think I've done a lot of cognitive behavioral therapy, and that sounds really fancy. And I know we don't have the hours to talk about that. But a lot of it is also changing my thinking. So when I know that I'm getting into a negative pattern, I'll kind of head it off, and I'll be more focused on being thankful for what I have. I'll kind of spin things around and try to put a positive spin on them, and that's been one of the most impactful things for me.
Awesome. To that point, I kind of created a little AAA for my kids when they're trying to go through that sort of like CBT techniques and sort of.
Yeah.
So it's like AAA to acknowledge that the problem exists.
Yep.
You know, because if you are denying it and you're not accepting it, then how can you work on it? You know, so once you acknowledge, accept the help. You know, be willing to accept supports, accept advice, input, and suggestions. And the last A would be to act. You know, because you can accept it. Okay, yeah, it's here, but you don't necessarily do anything about it.
Yeah.
So acknowledge, accept, and act. And those 3 A's is what I teach my kids. Very, very important. So yeah, absolutely. So that's just another thing to kind of connect or add on to what you shared.
Yeah.
Is it equally okay for us to take medication? Because we all know Christians and Adventists taking medication when the suggestive route is to pray and fast. What are your thoughts?
Yeah. Oh, this is such a hard one.
Oh, I'm telling you.
It's the thing. My thought is that it needs to be individual choice, just like any other disease, any other health problem. It's a choice, right? We don't question it in other ways. We're like, oh, you should fast more, and then your heart disease will go away. Then you don't have to take your pills anymore. That doesn't make sense to me. I think one of the biggest things that happens with people with depression or any kind of mental health problem in the church is that often they get discounted. You know, so you're either like you're discounted, or people will just kind of be like, oh, I'm going to avoid that person because I don't know how to handle it. Or, there's just like so many things like that happen where you can just sit with someone and be like, what's up? Like, tell me what's happening. Make them feel valued.
And you don't have to be a therapist to do
No,
that.
not at all.
Good. I'm so happy you shared that. That's some really powerful keys and points for us to reflect on. So thank you so much for that. I really appreciate you coming and joining and shedding light on depression and sharing how depression in the church and how relevant and very important it is for us to have these topics and these conversations, tiny chair talks even. And would love to have you back. You have so much information to give and a lot of different areas that have impacted your life, and you have clearly impacted others, and we appreciate you. Thank you so much.
It's been awesome.
Love it. Thank you guys for tuning in to another episode of Tiny Chair Talks. Stay tuned, more to come.